car crashes, defective products, dangerous drugs, injuries, and abuse. Across the state of Alabama, the attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis, Wright, are here to serve you. Your tough legal questions answered by our experts with the attorneys of Hollis, Wright.
Good evening. Welcome to the attorneys. I'm Art Franklin. Tonight's show is about something that's very essential for any family navigating life after separation or divorce. We're talking about developing a parenting plan that actually grows with your family. Thanks for joining us. We want to remind you right at the top of the show that we have attorneys at Hollis Wright standing by right now to take your calls. We man the phones immediately after the show begins. All you have to do is call 1-844-LAW-TALK. That's 1-844-LAW-TALK. You'll reach someone at Hollis Wright for a free and confidential call, so go ahead and do it right now. Carter Clay is here. Good to see you, Carter.
Yeah, good to see you, Art. Hope you're doing well.
I'm making it through. Voice doesn't normally sound like this, but we're going to make it through all right. We also have with us attorney Beth Clayton-Pierce. Thanks so much for being with us, Beth.
It's good to be here.
Yeah, Beth, thanks so much for coming in and joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. We're going to be talking about divorce. Now, Art, as you know, we've covered divorce quite often on this show. It's a topic that is particularly relevant, unfortunately, to a lot of people out there in the community. But we're going to take a little bit of a different approach tonight with Beth. She's developed some really good materials for us to cover tonight concerning developing a parenting plan and really getting into those details and helping parents sort of reduce, if not hopefully eliminate, a lot of the conflict and confrontation that can arise between parents during the proceedings of getting a divorce and certainly after divorce with respect to children. So Beth, thank you so much for putting this together tonight. We appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's good to be here. And, I tell my clients all the time, when you're getting a divorce, you're not going to be done with this person. If you have kids, you've got the rest of your children's lives to be together and to show up at the same softball games, the same graduations, the same weddings. You're going to be around each other. So you really have to think of a way to approach the parenting in a collaborative way. Even if you're hurt, you have to love your children more than you hate the other person in that moment.
Yeah, I've heard, I don't do divorce work, but I've heard that the biggest impediment to a divorce are the children. Now, right. I can attest, thankfully my wife and I have been married 25 years, never gone through a divorce before. Children can create conflict even in the absence of divorce. But certainly when you're getting a divorce, they can create conflict between the husband and wife as part of those proceedings. But how would you characterize that? Do you see that issues with respect to children are the biggest issue that you confront in dealing with parents who want to get a divorce?
I don't know that it's issues dealing with the children necessarily. The issue is with separating out the issues concerning the children with everything else that may be going on in that relationship. For example, I had a client the other day who said, I just found out my wife's been cheating on me. I want full custody now. And I said, well, what does her mothering have to do with her cheating?
Right.
Because those two things aren't related, but in this client's mind, the two were part and parcel to each other. And so a lot of times I think people have a hard time separating out, developing a plan that's best for their children and looking objectively at the other parent as a parent, not as a romantic partner or as a spouse, and then deciding all of that and then saying, okay, now who gets the house, who gets the 401k, how are we going to equalize the business division?
Yeah. Do you find that parents oftentimes will what I'll call weaponize the children against the other one? And a lot of times that's what that person's referring to. My wife's cheating on me, I want full custody. Sometimes that can be a knee-jerk reaction to, I'm going to show you, I'm going to take the kids away. Do you see that oftentimes?
Oh yeah, and I think that a lot of times you'll see parents who will do things like, they'll sign up a child for T-ball when they know the other parent has the weekends. And so the intention may not be overtly to take that time away from the other parent, but that's certainly a consequence of it. And so I think what a lot of people do is they start, when they're going through the process of a divorce, they start thinking independently instead of collaboratively, but your children still require you to think and act collaboratively and not act in that knee-jerk way, whether it's directly weaponizing the children by talking badly about the other parent or whatever it may be, or indirectly weaponizing the children by just using them to manipulate the other parent.
Yeah, let's unpack this a little bit. So where does this developing a parenting plan come into play? So obviously you get retained by mom or dad. Mom or dad has another lawyer. So you're in kind of active litigation. Is the parenting plan that you're developing, is that just part of a comprehensive settlement agreement that you hope to reach between these two individuals as part of the divorce?
It should be, yeah. And a lot of that's going to always depend on not just what me and my client are doing, but what the other person and their attorney are doing. Because if they've called in somebody who's going to be a bulldog about it, they're going to go for the jugular every chance, you're not going to be able to collaborate with somebody who has that approach. So in choosing the attorney, that's something that you should be asking those questions about, like, how do you feel about mediating some of these things? How do you feel about collaborative co-parenting and developing this plan? Because a lot of times I think people think, well, I'll just put this in front of a judge and they'll see my side and I'll win. But 90% of the time when the case goes to a judge, both people leave unhappy. And so if you can sit down together and really think about, like, okay, how are we going to handle extracurriculars? How are we going to handle paying for their car or saving for college or all of these things, and put that all into that agreement and at least settle the issue of the children, then you can always separate out the financial side of it too.
Yeah, and one aspect I think that probably does and should encourage parents to try and resolve these issues on their own is it takes quite a while to actually get your case to trial for a divorce proceeding. What is sort of the average time frame that you're looking at now if you actually go to trial?
Oh, I think if a case is going to trial, it's probably going to be a year-long case.
Yeah,
it's going to take about a year, and remember, you can't really you can't remarry at all. You shouldn't be dating during that time, or bringing a new romantic interest around your children or any of that. So it's going to really kind of hinder your ability to get back out there and restart your life when this is over, if you're going to go through that process. And the other factor is it's expensive. I think there was an article that came out in Forbes that said that the average divorce costs $15,000. And if you're preparing for a trial, a full day trial and one attorney's hourly rate is already going to be several $1,000s, not even counting the prep time, the depositions, the discovery, all the stuff you have to do to prepare to litigate.
Yeah, and as I'm listening to you, and I wanted to drill down a little bit further on the plan itself. What does a plan look like, a parenting plan?
So it's going to include the standard things like, what the parenting time looks like for each parent, but it's also going to include things, if you're planning correctly, about who gets the child when they're sent home sick from school, or these days we're canceling school every 3 days for a weather issue. Whose responsibility will that be to miss work and be there with your kid? How are you going to handle their car? How are you going to handle extracurricular expenses when they get to high school and they need money for prom or for dates or for things like that? How are you going to handle the children's money when they get old enough to have money? One issue that I see come up a lot is the issue of children's cell phones. Because if a child gets in trouble, they get grounded, they have their cell phone taken away, that's often the other parent's primary method of communicating with that child. And so you need to think through kind of not just the moment you're in. My husband and I have a toddler right now, so we're not even thinking about school expenses and all of that. But one day we will need to have those things ironed out, and the more detailed you can get initially, the better off you're going to be as you proceed through the plan, and the fewer revisions you'll have to make.
Yeah, I know we're going to go to break. On the other side of the break, though, Beth's got some great advice on how to deal with that uncooperative or uncompromising individual who just doesn't want to agree to anything.
Yeah, that's some advice you don't want to miss, so you've got to stick around for that as Beth breaks that down for us. But also want to remind you, there's a QR code. You probably see that QR code on your screen. Go ahead, scan that QR code. That's another way that we make it available for you to reach an attorney at Hollis, Wright, who's standing by right now. We're going to take a break. We're talking about developing a parenting plan that grows with your family. Our guest is Beth Clayton Pierce. We'll be back continuing that discussion and more right here on The Attorneys. Stay with us.
Here's some good information from our firm to you. Hollis Wright recently launched the Law Talk podcast. With podcasts becoming so popular, this will be a simple way to provide our loyal viewers with more opportunities to access information about important legal topics and to learn more about our firm and how we can help you if the need ever arises. There are many ways to access the Law Talk podcast. You can simply scan the QR code on your screen. Also, episodes are always available on the Hollis Wright YouTube channel, as well as on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you consume your podcasts. Just search up Hollis Wright in the Law Talk podcast. Don't wait, take advantage and listen today. Thanks for watching The Attorneys, and we know you'll enjoy the Law Talk podcast.
The Attorneys, proudly sponsored by the law firm of Hollis Wright, are here to serve you.
When we started the show in 2011, my goal was to do what our firm does best. Help people answer questions related to real-world legal issues they have in their lives in a way that's not intimidating to talk with a lawyer. If the issue is important to you, it's equally important to us, and we're ready to talk with you at no cost.
Yeah, oftentimes people are confronting various legal issues in their lives that really run the gamut of a lot of different legal practice areas, such as bankruptcy, criminal law, civil law, such as personal injury, divorces, domestic relations. And to be able to have a show once a week that covers those practice areas and answers people's questions in those areas, that's really the main objective of the show.
We use the resources of the many lawyers at our law firm to create a plan that has a lasting impact for each person that calls or texts. And we also give back to the community at the same time. We are here to serve you, the viewer, each week on The Attorneys.
Addiction kills hope.
But at Bradford, it all changes here.
Experience the difference
that proven treatment can make.
Find recovery. Find community.
At Bradford.
Welcome back to The Attorneys. We're here with attorney Beth Clayton Pierce, and we're discussing parenting plans and also reminding you that you can reach someone at Hollis Wright right now at 1-844-LAW-TALK. That's 1-844-LAW-TALK. You can get free confidential call. They're standing by to hear from you as we're hearing from Beth. This is a very fascinating topic, though. I know we've talked about it before, but not in this sense.
Yeah, and let's continue along those lines, Beth. So as I understand this parenting plan and the development of the parenting plan, you're really getting into the details of what the needs of the children are on a day-to-day basis, really along the lines of picking up from school, taking them to school, after-school activities, sports, weekend activities, all of that. You're trying to address that at least in a complete and comprehensive way to avoid confusion or problems between the parents.
Exactly. My standard, without adding new things that's unique to each family, my standard document's about 20 pages long. And so it is detailed in terms of how in-depth we need to go about the children.
And if the parents will agree to it as part of the divorce proceedings, it's just rolled into a more comprehensive and robust agreement related to the division of physical assets, the home, money, 401k plans, how health insurance is going to be handled, all of that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Yep. That's all part of that same marital settlement agreement. And then the court will look at it, confirm that it complies with kind of basic requirements for what the law requires for custody agreements. So is child support calculated correctly? Is it a conscionable custody arrangement? Those sorts of things. And the court will look at it and they'll decide to ratify that agreement. If they ratify it, that means they turn the agreement into a court order. And both parties have to follow it just like they would any other order.
Yeah, now, to what extent, this is the lawyer coming out at me, but to what extent is this parenting plan actually enforceable? For instance, what if the father is supposed to take Johnny, 12-year-old, to all of his travel ball tournaments on the weekend, and he decides, well, I'm just not going to do that anymore, and he doesn't take his son to any of these tournaments? I mean, can you force them to get it more involved? Like, what's the enforcement mechanism of all this?
Yeah, that's a question I get a lot because parents will say, how do I make the other parent do their parenting time? And the answer is you can't. You can't litigate someone into being a good parent, but you can protect your children from bad parents. And so a lot of times parents will say, well, I didn't get my phone call on Tuesday, so they're in contempt of this order. Well, yes, they are technically in contempt. But I'll tell you, just to file to have a judge say they're in contempt is going to cost you $300. That's just your filing fee. So how big is the problem? And it really kind of puts the issue into perspective for the parents. Now, is the parent letting your child completely run amok and disregard all of the values you've set that is in a way damaging the child? Then absolutely, let's take it back in front of a judge. But the little nitpicky things, keep your records. And if you have your records, you have your ledgers. When you do have to go back on something bigger, you have a record that they've disregarded it multiple times.
Yeah, you don't want to be penny wise and pound foolish. Some of these things might be cost prohibitive to go back in front of the judge, but I was thinking as you were answering that question, I suppose that one thing a parent could do is that if the other parent is not complying with the parenting plan that was part of the settlement agreement in some respects, but is in other respects, you could go before the court and say, well, look, he doesn't just get to pick and choose what he wants to do here. If he doesn't want to do X, then he shouldn't be allowed to do Y, which is something that he wants to do. And I suppose the court could get involved and say, yeah, you can't have your cake and eat it too, sir, or
That's
ma'am.
true. That's true. And a lot of times the confusion will come in, parents will say, well, they haven't paid their child support, so they can't have visitations.
Yeah.
And those two are not related. A parent's still entitled to visitation even if they're not paying. So that's one way that I think parents kind of get themselves in contemptuous conduct too, is one parent's failure to abide by it doesn't justify your failure to abide by it. Yeah. So you still have to keep doing the next right thing even if the other parent's not.
Yeah, let's talk about modifying the agreement or amending the agreement. Obviously, when parents get divorced, their children may be young. It may be even before they get into sports and activities and things of that nature. I actually saw a little girl, 2 or 3-year-old little girl in a convenience store the other day, and she got so excited that her parents were buying her this $2 thing of candy in the store. And I was thinking back as a father of a 22-year-old, I was like, man, it's been a long time since my daughter got excited about something that was only worth $2. So they change a lot and they grow up, and so they have different needs and things of that nature. So how do you do the modification of these plans to sort of be consistent with how the parents want to raise them?
Yeah, I mean, I would expect that parents who divorce with young children will need to modify several times because you don't know who your children are going to become. You don't know what their interests or passions are going to be. They may want to, go to the School of Math and Science or something like that requires something extraordinary that you just couldn't have planned for. So you should plan to modify periodically, but you should plan to do that in a collaborative way. And again, I keep saying that, but in a way that sits down with a mediator or sits down with somebody who can help say, okay, what's working for you? What's working for you? How do we put this together in a way that still benefits that child? And at some point, when the children are old enough, I'm talking teenage years, letting the children be part of that conversation as well.
What advice do you have for people out there who are dealing with an incredibly uncooperative parent who just doesn't really want to agree to much of anything?
Yeah, these days everybody's married to a narcissist, right?
Yeah,
like we see it all the time. Everybody's married to a narcissist. But the way that you handle that is you overcompensate with information. And you say, here's the access to access their medical records with their pediatrician. Here's the login to the school to make sure that you can access all the school's information. Here's a copy of the T-ball schedule. This is your copy. Make sure you keep it. Because what you don't want to do is start excluding that parent, because even though that feels like a really easy way to protect yourself, it doesn't help your kids. If the other parent truly is a bad person, your kids will figure that out on their own, and they'll figure it out in due time. They don't need you explaining that to them or helping them figure that out before they're ready.
Yeah.
They'll get it.
I know, I'm curious about this. In the materials that you provided, you mentioned something about an app. Is there actually an app out there for divorced parents in terms of like creating these schedules to help facilitate communication between the two?
Yeah, there are a couple. App Close and Talking Parents are the two that the courts most often order. And we'll have they can communicate in those apps directly, so it's secure messages, and it's also, the app will provide an authenticated record of the communication for evidence if you need it later. But it gives you calendars where you can both calendar things, you can pay each other back, you can log expenses and reimbursements that way, and it provides a really great single source for kind of what has been going on in this family, so that if you ever do have to go back and calculate up what's owed or what happened when, not only do you have what happened, but you have an authenticated third party that can say, timestamps don't lie.
Yeah. And having that permanent record really helps you put all your notes in those apps.
It does. We've got much more. We're just getting started here. We got another segment to talk about this topic on discussing parenting plans with Attorney Beth Clayton Pierce. We want you to stick around for that. Also want to remind you, this is your last opportunity to get in contact with someone at Hollis Wright at 1-844-LAW-TALK for a free confidential call, or you can scan that QR code on your screen and you can reach someone there. Stick around. We'll continue on right after this.
Thank you for watching The Attorneys each Sunday night, where we come to your living room to provide free legal advice in a confidential, off-air setting. Unfortunately, with the number of calls, texts, and emails that come in during the show, we can't always get to everything. But know this, Hollis Wright is open all week long. You call us at 844-LAW-TALK and we're going to answer your question for free. Thank you for watching The Attorneys, and we look forward to seeing you and talking to you soon.
If this place could talk, it wouldn't. It would sing and celebrate all of our stories of addiction recovery, victory, and community. This is Bradford Health Services. It all changes here.
We are back, and you are watching The Attorneys, and our guest is Beth Clayton Pierce. And we're wrapping up that discussion on parenting plans, which has really been fascinating. We were still talking about that app, the two apps that, what is it,
App Close and Talking Parents.
Talking Parents
are the two big ones.
Yeah, and they do what?
They let parents communicate with each other securely, calendar events, pay each other back for the children's expenses. And I can't recall which one it is, but one of them will even let your attorneys get an account and read everything directly. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes it's helpful even for me to be able to see there's your client side of the story, there's the other party's story, and then there's the truths usually somewhere in the middle. And so it lets me kind of come in and say, now let's talk about your tone a little bit, and let me coach them on how they could be a better co-parent as well.
That's good stuff.
Yeah. What are some of the areas that you find that parents have the most difficult time agreeing upon when it comes to their children? For instance, is it social media usage? Is it a curfew? Is it dating? Like, what are you seeing in that area these days?
A lot of it really comes down to the younger children. And that's where the disagreements are. And I think it's because by the time the kids are older, they've kind of got their own opinions and ideas. And the die is kind of cast in a way with them. Though I have one case going on right now over whether or not the daughter's allowed to date a boy that she likes, and it's a whole thing. So I think a lot of times the issue becomes extracurriculars, especially with kids' sports these days, are absolutely insane, the amount of requirements they put on families. Yeah. And that's the biggest point of contention, I think, is those kids' extracurriculars. Now, when you start seeing kids with extraordinary medical needs, that kind of thing as well, that also puts a lot of pressure. But that puts pressure on families anyway, but when you're dealing with co-parenting and one parent's having to keep up with these medical needs, keep up with the specialist appointments and all of that, it's a big burden.
With respect to these extracurricular activities, is the issue primarily the extent to which they're going to participate in all of these activities?
Well, the extent, but also the schedules are just nuts. I mean, my niece is in 3-year-old soccer, and she has games at like 7:30 on school nights. And so how do you get everybody in one place, and how do you make custodial swaps work when a lot of it's at the whim of a coach that doesn't have anything to do with your family?
Well, and a lot of these activities, they can be expensive, especially as you get into the middle school and travel ball and all of that, where you're traveling and you have to stay in hotels. I guess they have to work out an agreement or attempt to work out cost splitting agreements in that regard as well.
Right, and that is a big one too, the hotels for travel ball and that sort of thing. So I'm not paying for half of the other person's hotel. No, you're paying for half of your child's hotel. Yeah. And one of you has to go with your child, so y'all can take turns, whatever you want to do. But a lot of times the agreements will say, parents will split half of the mutually agreed upon extracurriculars. Yeah. Well, then all the parent has to say is, I don't agree.
which makes me think about how do parents actually, balance their personal desires with what is actually best for their children?
How does any parent do that, honestly? I mean, how do you do that? It's hard. And if you're now switching to becoming a single parent, it becomes even harder. And you're trying to start dating again, and you're trying to do all those things. You just have to think about, is what I'm doing good for my child?
Is that part of that 20-page plan that you have?
We put dating and cohabitation in there, certainly, because it's disruptive to children to see an inflow and outflow of new significant others for their parents. It's confusing, especially if they're too young to understand, but they form bonds with these people. And so you want to try to make sure that you're insulating them from those volatile relationships.
Yeah, and I would think that being flexible and communication obviously is the key, but being flexible I would think is the key as well, because life throws at you a lot of uncertainty and curveballs. And look, if you're a parent and you're supposed to have the child one weekend, but you have something that you would like to do, maybe you want to go on a date, maybe you want to go out of town with your friends, why not call the other parent and say, hey, I know it's not your weekend, but would you mind taking little Johnny or Sally or whoever, would you want to have them this weekend and I'll just keep them next weekend? I mean, I would think that'd be part of the process, wouldn't it?
Or just, would you like the extra time?
Yeah.
It doesn't even always have to be a trade.
Quid pro quo, yeah.
Right, it can just sometimes be, hey, I've got something that's come up. Would you like to see your kids this weekend? And see if they want to spend the time. Just remember that your soon-to-be ex is the other most important person to your child. And you can honor your child by respecting that person, no matter how much you don't like them.
I was going to just ask, how often are you using what we call alternative dispute resolution, which is basically a form of mediation that you would go to with a third-party neutral mediator to help resolve these types of issues? Do you use the mediators a lot in these cases?
We don't often use mediators. We need to use them more. The problem is it's expensive to mediate, but 95% of divorces settle. So there is still some degree of offer, counteroffer, collaboration. And a lot of times what will happen is the attorneys will, knowing their clients' positions, come together and say, okay, let's kind of informally mediate this for them and figure out where can your client give a little, where can my client give a little, to get them to the middle where they need to be.
So as we're nearing the end of the show, what's your single most important recommendation for a family that may be crafting a plan or revising a parenting plan?
Think about the kids first and yourself second. That has to be the goal.
Yeah, and I know also keeping your emotions in check.
Yes.
And communication is the key, because I do know just from talking with other lawyers that handle divorces, parents will throw good money after bad money during a divorce. They will let their emotions get in the way.
I did a trial over a lawnmower one time.
Yeah.
A whole trial over a lawnmower.
They'll pay significant money rather than just give them the other items. So keep your emotions in check. Communication is the key.
Yeah, and develop a parenting plan. That's why they need you.
Hopefully.
Absolutely. Well, Beth, we certainly appreciate you being with us. Beth Clayton-Pierce.
It's always good to see you as well.
Always good to see you as well. And always good to have you guys join us here on The Attorneys, where we discuss important information like this. Also want to remind you that you can still get in contact with someone at Hollis Wright right now. Running out of time, go ahead and do it. And make sure you make an appointment for us next week, same place, same time. We'll do it again. Hope to see you there.
Thanks for watching The Attorneys, sponsored by Hollis Wright.